Howdy, what are you doing?
Well, boss, you told me to try to catch potential customers using the net, so I am.
Cody, what should you have done?
Squarespace.
I should have used Squarespace.
See what the audio levels
In
are like.
1955, an 18-year-old boy named James Maury Henson was hard at work in his parents' living room. He hovered over a small table on which he had placed an assortment of materials.
All right.
Sewing tools, glue, an old felt coat that had once belonged to his mother, and one ping pong ball. He took
think
the
I need
tattered
to
coat, now in a
change
pile of separate pieces, and stitched together a long tube, just big enough for an arm. On this, he placed two smaller pieces of cloth, tacked his two arms on a body. He created a triangular head and jaw, big enough for his large hand to operate. Finally, he cut the ping pong ball in half, gluing the pieces to either side of the head and marking both with large black slash circles. He then put his hand through the bottom of the puppet, turning it to face him. What was moments ago just felt and string,
All right.
Jim Henson had
Let's
given
see
character.
how this goes.
Kermit was alive.
Hello there, my name is Jim Henson, and I'm a puppeteer. I'm called a puppeteer because I work with puppets.
So true, King.
Okay, you're gonna love this story. Greatest story in the world.
Hey, thank you, and welcome again to another Muppet
Okay,
Show.
what was I doing?
Jim Henson was born on September 24th, 1936 in
Alright.
Greenville, Mississippi. He was the youngest son
Time
of
to do
Paul and
hunting
Betty Henson.
logs.
His father's work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture forced Jim, his mother, and his older brother, Paul Jr., to move back and forth between Mississippi and Maryland, eventually moving for the final time in 1948, landing just outside of the University of Maryland in a home in University Park. Jim loved music, and he would often sing with his brother as his mother played an old organ. The family owned various songbooks with which Jim would become familiar, such as A.A. Milne's songbook featuring a few personal favorites of Jim, Halfway Down the Stairs and Cobblestone Pie. Jim's creativity was always encouraged by his grandmother, Dear, who clearly saw something special in the young boy. Throughout their childhood, Jim and Paul Jr. would spend the majority of their time together, often tinkering and building things such as model airplanes and radios. Jim loved to listen to the radios with which he worked, especially tuning into radio dramas. However, his love for radio would be overshadowed by the rise of a new invention, a device that would change his life, and a machine that he would use to change the world. At the age of 13, Jim Henson heard of television. He begged his parents to buy him a set, and they would a year later in 1950. Jim was enamored with TV, consuming as much as he could throughout his teenage years. He was exposed to some of the most innovative comedy performances of the day, with stars such as Ernie Kovacs and Milton Berle making a strong impression on the young boy. In high school, Jim joined his school's drama club, where he took time performing and building sets, although he heavily favored the latter. As his high school career progressed, his love for television grew, and his yearning to be a part of it intensified.
I am
He planned
gaming.
to attend the University of Maryland in the fall of 1954, hoping to study set design. And throughout his senior year, he began looking for ways to break into the television industry. When his local CBS station, WTOP, posted positions for their new program, the Junior Morning Show, specifically asking for young puppeteers,
Blizzard
Jim
time.
was thrilled. There was only
Double
one
ammo.
problem. He knew nothing about puppetry.
But not the bad Blizzard.
Despite this,
The good
Jim
one.
jumped on the opportunity, checking out 2 books on the performance medium from his local library. These books taught him not only how to operate a puppet, but how to
Blizzard
properly build
cringe.
one as well. Jim's first creation was a ham puppet named Pierre the Rat, which he used in his audition for the Junior Morning Show. Jim's work
Shit,
paid off,
that's not what I
and he was
wanted.
offered a position at WTOP with a starting pay of $5 per episode, or about $70 today when adjusted for inflation. The show, hosted by local television personality Roy Meacham, only aired for 3 weeks. It was quickly canceled for violating child labor laws by employing children under the age of 14.
Ooh,
Despite
stinky.
the show airing for such a short time, a local newspaper writer praised the puppet segments.
Oh, I'm fighting this thing? I didn't know that.
Meacham grew a fondness for the young man, and he
Whoops,
invited Jim to
and I
appear
picked the
on
wrong
his
one.
WTOP show,
We go back to
Saturday,
fighter.
where Jim would create
Double
little
ammo.
skits in which puppets lip sync to music. Saturday would only last until August of 1954, just as Jim began his first semester of college. But he wouldn't be absent from TV for long. James Kovac,
I got the booster shot, so my arm is hurting a little bit.
Kovac would put Jim to work, asking him to perform as puppets on various programs on the station. It was around this time that Jim would first use the term Muppets to describe his
wrong one.
creations. For years, it was believed to be a
Got
combination
my
of
flu shot today.
marionettes
Same.
and puppets,
Let's
but he
go.
would later admit that it was just something he made up. Early in his college career, Jim decided to switch his major from production design to home economics, which taught similar skills with a
Need one
less
more.
rigorous course load. Perfect for Jim, considering he spent
Arm
much of his free
hurdy.
time performing. Serendipitously, the University
But
of
it's good
Maryland
hurdy.
decided to add a puppetry class as part of the home economics curriculum. The class was
I need
taught by a
more
professor with
MP.
no
Imagine the
experience
flu
in
shot.
puppetry, meaning that Jim,
No.
now somewhat known for his stints on
It's,
local television, had the most experience in the class. This,
I haven't had it in a long
combined
time,
with and tall stature,
so getting it was nice.
20-year-old Jane Neville.
Did I not send it? Oh, yeah, I
After
did.
being the
Okay.
efficient puppeteer in the class, Jim took notice of her as well. The soft-spoken yet commanding freshman approached her, asking if she would be willing to perform with him on tonight's program. She agreed. With the help of an additional talented hand, the two would continue
Okay.
to develop and improve the style of the Muppets.
More, my arms and
With
shoulders
more
are sore because
elaborate
it started
lip-syncing
strength
routines and
training.
skits.
God, he's
In
so
early 1955,
so strong.
Jim and Jane began performing puppet skits on WRC-TV's new variety program, Afternoon. Despite his success on local TV and healthy compensation for his work, Jim was not content.
Got him
It
on
might
the
have been self-doubt of
lines.
his own
It's over
talent,
here, right?
or it could have been a general disinterest in puppetry as a future
That might be a
no matter the reason, Jim shyly
actual,
begged the reporter at WRC-TV to
okay,
talk
it's
to
up here.
Kovac for him
Alright.
and convince him to give him a job as a crew
might be
member
too
instead
strong
of as
for
a
me at the
performer.
moment.
The reporter laughed Jim off and encouraged him to stick with puppetry. It might just make him rich. Jim and Jane's segments on Afternoon were so entertaining that it was no surprise that WRC-TV wanted more. However, the offer they extended was more
Strength is
lucrative
pathetic.
than
Well, you gotta start somewhere.
WRC-TV
And that's the
would
truth.
replace Jim and Jane in a 5-minute slot between the evening news and the Tonight Show, where they would exclusively write and perform their Muppet segments.
What are these guys
the new
called?
duo would not hesitate to accept the offer, and they were excited to play around in their new creative sandbox.
The roundsman, right? Yeah.
Sam and friends.
Sam and friends.
Brought to you by that guy.
They're definitely in here, right?
Jim and Jane's new show,
Yep.
Sam and Friends, made its debut on May 9th, 1955
There's
on
one.
WRC-TV.
Gaming.
The show starred a full cast of Muppets, many of which Jim had built for variety shows that he had been working on over the past year. The show's titular star, a puppet named Sam,
Kablam.
had his uniqueness and his inflexibility. He had a solid face, unlike many of the other 12 puppets on the show. He would only be seen lip-syncing directly, and he was the only human in the show's cast.
God,
His
he's
friends
weaving.
were much more abstract. There was Yorick, a
Oh, I need to
purposeful
put a raisin on.
Professor Madcliffe, a
My
rambunctious
fire
character
missed?
that
So
often found
cringe.
himself promoting products in the show's commercials. Chicken Liver, a grumpy character that was disgusted by the immaturity of the rest of the cast. Harry the Hipster, a cool, jazz-loving character that wouldn't be caught without his signature shades. And Kermit, an abstract, lizard-like turquoise monster that seemed to find himself in front of the camera
Let's go,
more
Kermit.
often than the others. The main members would often wear wigs or outfits, almost as if the characters themselves were performing as another character. In the early days of the show, the
That's a
skits
level
consisted almost
48. That's gonna be a no for me, dog.
exclusively of the records. The climax of the formula Jim had developed was the explosive finale. Most of the skits ended with the character getting swallowed alive or blown up. Some viewers were shocked or confused.
Oh, he's
by
a
the
vor
segments, but
fanatic. I
Jim
see.
loved them. Over time, the show would add
There's
bits of
another one.
humor,
Oh, shit.
painful puns,
Nope.
and genuine sentimentality. The show was supposed to revolve around Sam.
This
coping with
one's
the
level
struggles of
48
everyday
though.
life,
I
often
was
finding solace,
I was
if
late
not
killing it.
distraction, in his energetic and wild friends. In the show's world,
I'm
Sam
lamb.
was the only character that existed in reality. And Kermit, Yorick, and all of his other friends were either figments of his imagination or exaggerated parts of his own inner self.
I'm
This
lamb.
would be one of the first attempts Jim made to instill a deeper meaning of the Muppet language. The cast of Sam and Friends grew as Jim continued to build more Muppets, with other creatures such as Icky Gunk, Omar, and
Oh,
Marshmallow
blam.
being added. It is difficult to tell just how large the cast became, or just how many episodes Jim and Jane produced. One shortcoming of the young creator was his lack of foresight in recording his first
Oh,
original
shit.
series. To be fair, Sam and Friends aired during the age of the kinescope, a device in which a film camera recorded the live television feed only to play it back. This was necessary without the existence of videotapes. Jim and WRC-TV recorded very few
Shit.
episodes of Sam and Friends, and many of those that were recorded have been lost. Ironically, there is only one
Satch.
publicly available Sam and Friends episode featuring Sam himself, although photos of him appearing in other scenes exist, and other episodes could be in various archives. More episodes than are viewable
Thunder.
have been documented in either TV listings, script form, or picture form. A myriad of episodes have been described from the memories of fans, but even if these skits existed in the way in which they were remembered, it is nearly impossible to tell if the skit in question was shown on Sam and Friends, Afternoon, or the countless other
one
DC
more,
area
okay.
shows that Jim and Jane appeared.
What,
Luckily, the most popular
nope.
skits from Sam and Friends have either been
I am,
found or have been
not
re-performed
doing
by
that.
Jim and Jane elsewhere. Audiences were mesmerized by the Muppets. At At this point in time, puppets were thought to be exclusive to bouncy marionettes or wooden dolls where only the mouth was able to be manipulated. Jim and Jane subverted this expectation completely. The Muppets could show a wide range of emotions thanks to
Let's go,
their
we're
powerful
back.
shape. For instance, Kermit could display his inner feelings clearly for the audience just by Jim adjusting the placement of his fingers. This purposeful design was necessary for television, which, through the placement of the camera, tended to be much more intimate than stage puppetry. Early in Sam and Friends production, Jim would place live feed monitors on the studio floor.
Let's
in order to
go,
see
gaming.
the jealousy. This greatly helped both his and Jim's performance, and it was a practice that he would keep. Jim also saw an opportunity to change the way children's entertainment was
Damage.
shown. Up to this point, every puppet show filmed and aired on TV was a production that existed outside of the television medium. The performers would set up their puppet stages on a set, and the TV studio would focus the cameras head-on.
Let's
framing
go.
the stages perfectly into the
Time to
square
go.
box
How
screen
much money do I
on the
have?
screen.
I have the, that's
Sam
how many
and Friends
seals
would be
I
the
have.
first puppet
Okay.
show created for and taking
I
advantage
could
of the
level
new
up
medium of
once, right?
television.
In the
Jim didn't need a
thing.
puppet stage to frame all of the action. The television
Time to
screen was the
schmove.
puppet stage, and with the flexibility of the television camera, Jim and Jane had a lot more space to perform. For the first time,
No, it's
the
not this one,
puppeteer
it's
was
the
not
other one.
constrained to a
It
tiny
is
stage.
the Black
Jim's
Shroud.
creations could roam free. Each episode of Sam
Let's
and Friends would
go.
be an average of 4 minutes, with the last 60 seconds dedicated to a sponsor, typically SK Beats. Jim and Jane would shoot a short skit to advertise the products using the characters from the main show.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll try to remain calm as I tell you about the new SK idea in flavor. It's the new SK pork and bacon sausage. It combines a
Pork and bacon sausage.
pork sausage with the delicious flavor of hickory smoked quality bacon.
Sam and Friends was an immediate hit. Those tuning in on weeknights loved the unique and funny show, and local newspapers praised
Time
the
to
addition
promote.
to WRC's lineup, with the main complaint being the show's short running time.
Oh, I need to do the
This
quest.
tells
That's
just
right.
how many fans Jim and Jane had.
Wait, what level
Some
did I have to
bad
be?
news would give them
Perfect.
a rough
Let's
start.
go.
In the summer of 1955, just months after Sam and Friends' first episode, WRC canceled the show
Now
in
what?
order to rearrange their late-night programming block. Immediately after the announcement, angry fans contacted the station and told
I'm
them
gaming.
no choice but to uncancel the show. This would result
Many
in
people are
Sam
saying
and Friends
this.
only airing 3 times a week instead of 5, but Jim and Jane were thrilled to have the ability to continue performing. Sam and Friends would be moved throughout WRC's lineup as the station saw fit, and Jim and Jane's focus shifted toward their work on afternoon during late 1955 and early
Zoop.
1956. Jane graduated from
Fly
the
time.
University of Maryland and began to pursue her master's at a school in Washington, D.C. She purposefully built her schedule in a way to continue working on both afternoon and Sam and Friends, prioritizing puppetry and Jim. Jim was thrilled to have Jane
La la
continue
la
working,
la
as she
la.
had proven to be the perfect partner. Great things were happening for the young Jim Henson, but a tragedy would distract from the success. On April 15, 1956, a car accident took the life of Jim's brother, Paul Henson Jr. The event devastated both Jim and his parents. Henson biographer Brian J. Jones detailed the lasting impact the loss had on the young creator, describing Jim's repressed sadness over the loss of his brother and the way in which the tragedy motivated Jim's creative work in an unexpected way. Instead of using his sorrow to create dark and gritty material, the loss of his brother only pushed Jim's creations towards zany, colorful, humorous, and above all, optimistic works. Jim would later describe
Oh, is this
himself as
a
having an unnatural amount of
thing I
quote,
can
ridiculous
queue
obvious,
into?
a
Okay.
trait that those close to him would cherish, and that the audience of his shows would gravitate toward.
Oh,
His brother's
I'm
death
queuing
had
for
another
it.
impact, an acute awareness of his own mortality.
Okay.
A ticking clock. In
I'm
May
doing
of
that.
1956, Jim and Jane would bring the Muppets to yet another
Cool.
WRC show, Footlight Theater, an interstitial between Western films in which the Muppets would
Now
interact
what?
with the show's host, guitarist Paul Arnold. The work on the show was not their favorite, and with Sam and Friends' unpredictable time slot, it seemed that the duo had hit a wall. However, Jim's creative mind was too big for just the DC market, and he and Jane would have their chance to prove the wide appeal of the Muppets in a big, unexpected way.
I can do love quests, right?
Couple of people now. Well, I use the word people advisedly, but several years ago in Washington,
Let's go love
D.C.,
quests.
there are 2 young college students, Jim Henson and Jane Neville. They got together with some little puppets, and they formed what
Where'd my mic go?
people in Washington now know as the Muppets. A little different than a puppet. And you folks in Washington, D.C. know them very well. They've been appearing
Ah.
all over WRC
Okay.
TV
Boss time.
for 2.5 years, and they're very big favorites. And
Let's go.
we can see why. We had them on our Tonight Show a few weeks ago, and they broke it up, so we're happy to have them with us today. Here are the Muppets.
On October 11th, 1956, Jim and Jane would make their first appearance on The Tonight Show with Steve Allen, the show that they regularly preceded in WRC's lineup. Producers of Tonight had caught wind of a peculiar puppet show that was airing before them in Washington, D.C., and they had asked Jim and Jane to audition for the show. They would be brought on to perform a sketch. Introducing the Muppets to the entire
It's time to fug this buzz.
Jim decided to take I've Grown Accustomed to Your Face, a funny lip-syncing sketch with Kermit and York. At this point, York was the audience favorite of the Muppets, coming out on top of a popularity poll. Sam and Mushmelon were second and third respectively, and Kermit was fourth. The appearance convinced WRC to give Sam and Friends its original weekly time slot before the Tonight Show back, and increased Jim's output significantly, causing him to temporarily withdraw from his studies at the University of Maryland. Jim would continue her schooling, leading to an even more hectic schedule than Jim.
That's pretty sick armor. All right.
Live twice a night, and make appearances on other shows. The hard work was paying off. Sam and Friends was getting better, with the duo improving the puppetry, gags, effects, and scenarios. Their audience loved all of it, but WRC seemed indifferent to the show's success. During yet another programming change, Sam and Friends' first evening appearance was cut, angering fans once again. And same as before, WRC listened to their frustrated audience, returning the 6:50 time slot to the show. The time slot would prove even better after NBC moved its soon-to-be-popular newscast Tony briefly to 6:45, and WRC placing Sam and Friends right before it.
Gaming.
This meant Sam and Friends was the lead into the two most popular shows on the channel. Jane exclaimed, quote, I mean, what could be better? You have national news, international news, weather, sports, and Kermit. Between the new programming and their appearance in the
Yeah, this is taking a while.
the Muppets were on their way to stardom. The sheer amount of content Jim and Jane were outputting was impressive. Even more incredible was its quality. Jim quickly developed a sort of
So you survived Q Savage. Yep. So true.
and there was only so much he could do before they went on the air. Screen of eye was sharpening, and the little tweaks and nitpicks that he had.
I've been in the video game probably like an hour before my work time actually finished. Jesus Christ. Okay, there we go. Finally. All right.
We're here to persuade people to drink more Wilkins coffee. What's the club for? To get their attention. Do you have any Wilkins coffee in your house? No. No, a house isn't a home without Wilkins coffee.
Gaming.
Second average featured two new characters, Wilkins, a Muppet that loved Wilkins coffee, and Wilkins, a Muppet that hated it. Wilkins would constantly punish Wilkins for not drinking the coffee, sometimes threatening the audience as well. Wilkins was voiced by Jim, in what would be his first consistent vocal roles as Sam and Friends still heavily relied on lip sync. The short ads were funny and violent, and they were more successful than Wilkins or Jim's. The advertisers became sort of a national.
Oh, okay.
Further placing the Muppets into the national cultural context.
I didn't know it did that.
Wilkins Coffee would even merchandise the advertisements with two hand puppets of Wilkins and Wilkins, which would be a huge hit. In 1958, Sam and Friends would win the Emmy for Best Local Entertainment Program.
Why did she do that? Why did that happen to me? I made my mistakes.
Although he was making a healthy living, especially for his age, he considered himself to be an artist first and a puppeteer second, and his allegiance was not to puppetry, but to the audience that loved his work. He was finally able to shake this mindset once and for all after a trip to Europe exposed him to the art and diversity of puppetry. Of this experience, he said, quote, it was at that point that I realized that puppetry was a valid way to do really interesting things. I came back from that trip all fired up.
Gaming.
During this trip, he had grown a great deal, which he would keep, and would become another aspect of his unique work. He returned to performing on Santa Claus, a college friend of his, Bob Payne, had assisted in Jim's absence. Jim's trip had taken his abundant creative energy and focused it, and he had a few things he needed to do.
My thing didn't go off. Sag.
In 1959, he would resume his
Dude.
at the University of
What the
Maryland,
fuck?
and more notably,
Stop.
Jim Henson will begin to date Jane Neville. The two had actually both been engaged. Jim to a teaching student named Anne Marie Hood, and Jane to a man named Phil Schmidt. Despite this, their close proximity and pleasing relationship was so
I'm cringing.
strong that it seemed like a matter of time for the two were to get together. They both broke off
Where the
their
fuck?
relationships and began
Okay, what do we do? I forget what we do.
Jim owned 60% and Jane 40%, was even foundation of their relationship.
Dude.
Jane would recall that the relationship was less based in romantic passion than it was in the passion for work, and the admiration
What the fuck
the two had
do I do?
talents. The two would be married on May 28, 1959, taking a short break from Santa Claus to go on England. When they returned, Jim's passion for puppetry and the show was stronger than ever. The Wilkins ads had instilled confidence in his ability to stay steady without a track, and he began testing out different voices for his Santa Claus characters. Giving Kermit, who seemed to be
What am I supposed to do?
a voice that was closest to his own, a soft-spoken, throat-heavy, nasally voice that would become both Kermit and Jim's trademark sound.
Listen here, but let's not be quite so formal. Why don't you just call me Kermit and I'll call you, well, what would you like me to call you?
sketches were created by Jim producing a tour acting the soundtrack of the dialogue and music that he and Jane would make perform. Jim also began to experiment with animation. He always enjoyed drawing the Muppet creations before building them, and much of Sam and Friends' promotional material were images he had drawn himself. Animation, a natural next step for the ambitious creator, would become a personal.
I get killed by her AoE spin. Spinneroonie. Oh shit.
Oh man, I'm a natural. Been doing it for years.
In May of 1960, Jim finally graduated from the University of Maryland. In the time he resumed his college education and completed it, he had married Jane, and she had given birth to their first child,
Lol.
a girl named Lisa Marie Henson. Just weeks after her birth, Lisa was already engulfed in the hectic life of the Muppets. That summer, Jim, Jane, and Lisa traveled to the 1960 Puppeteers of America convention. Jim went to the convention to see the works of and network with the famous puppeteers of the time. Here, he would meet television puppeteer Bert Tillstrom, who was well known for his program, Kukla, Fran, and Ollie, a show in which an ensemble of puppets acted as members of a theater troupe trying to put on a show.
Okay.
Tillstrom would introduce Jim to a few of his acquaintances,
I
including his puppet builder,
think I
a
was
man
doing
named
something.
Don
What was I
Saleen,
doing?
and a young agent named
What was
Bert
I gonna do?
Brillstein. Brillstein was uninterested in taking another puppeteer on as a client, but Tillstrom urged him to give Jim a chance. Brillstein invited Jim to a meeting in his New York office, describing that the first time he saw the puppeteer, he looked to be, quote, a cross between
what I was gonna do.
Jesus. Jim brought in a box of Muppets and performed a few skits for the agent. Brillstein was blown away, signing him on as a client without further hesitation. The next year, Jane became pregnant with her second child. Jim and Jane began discussing the possibility that Jane would have to stop performing, and the two started to look for new talent. They did so by traveling once
I totally
again to
forget
the
what I was gonna do.
American
Wow.
Convention, this time hoping to find someone to hire. The couple ran into a 21-year-old puppeteer named Jerome Jewell, a smart, witty performer that was already a fan of
Oh, Love
Muppets.
Mets. That's
Jim
right.
would sign him on as the first employee of Muppets Inc. Another potential candidate was the 17-year-old son of notable performers, Mike and Francis Osnowitz. The shy young boy was a gifted performer, but like Jim before him,
These ones might be level 50. They might be
Jim
too
was determined
strong.
to stay in touch with them, and hopefully after he graduated, Jim could hire Frank Oz to be a full-time performer with Muppets.
Let's go, Frank.
Jewel began work on Sam and Friends, taking over Jane's position. He proved himself to be a competent puppeteer and an incredible writer. Sam and Friends was at the
45.
height of its
Okay.
popularity throughout 1961.
Where are the
However,
40s?
Jim was ready to move on from the show, to experiment with the art form and push the boundaries of puppetry. Jim would write the following in his often succinct journal, quote, Sam and Friends, last show, December 15th, 1961. The end of the final show saw the entire set exploding around the cast, a fitting finale. Sam and Friends characters would continue to be used by Jim and Jerry in various live and televised performances over the next few years.
So it has to be the area before this, right?
Recognizable Muppets, and Kermit would remain on Jim's arm as he took Muppets Inc. on its next adventure. Sam and Friends would be missed by its fans in the DC area, but they had a feeling that this wouldn't be the last they would see of Jim Henson.
I'm going to explain about Muppets' meteoric rise in fame in both the world of entertainment and the field of commercials.
Okay, so you don't tell them the truth.
Guys, I'm sure.
Got 'em owned.
I sincerely hope you'll feature my birthday party tomorrow, Minstrel.
It would be a pleasure, your loveliness.
Well, I tried.
You know what a puppet is. You're a puppet.
I think there was some down here.
This is Don Saleen, who is our Muppet builder.
Frank has the right hand and you have the left, and who's operating the head?
I don't really know.
Hey, doctor, go hole in your headlight.
Now get out of here.
We got interested in the film medium.
I wonder which ones are stronger. It's probably these ones down here, right? With the 46 down here. That would make sense to me. I totally wouldn't get fugged by this. Definitely, for sure. Nothing to worry about here.
It's a 6-minute supper.
Here are 2 comedy scenes with the Muppets. I'm quite sure the adults will enjoy them too. The Muppets.
The 60s had been a time of growth for Jim and the Muppets. Jim had grown his team, finally added puppeteer Frank Oz.
Hey, alright. We're gaming. Oh, yes.
Jim and Jane now had
Okay, here we go.
Lisa, Cheryl, Brian, and Jim.
Alright.
The much larger Muppets Inc. had moved to New York City to produced a variety of
Bum,
commercials,
bum,
appeared
bum,
on nearly every variety and late-night show of the day, and had even produced a few art films. Despite all of the success and even some well-deserved fame, the Muppets had still yet to have their big break. But it was certainly on the horizon. A man named John Stone, who Jim had worked with years previously on a small
These have
project,
got to be good,
asked
right?
Jim to come
For
sit in on
sure.
some meetings for a show being developed by a new children's entertainment company. Jim agreed to attend the seminar,
Ba,
located at the
ba,
Waldorf
ba, ba.
Astoria Hotel in New York City. After all, it was just right down the street.
Let's go. I've done these already.
$251.
Ow.
$252.
Ow.
I told Cody here to make my website look great, and when I went to check it out, it said he made 404 errors. That means 404 whacks. 253.
Ow. I should have used Squarespace.
404 errors. That's a lot of them. That's a lot of errors.
Throughout the late 50s and 60s, one extraordinary person was climbing their way through the ranks of television. Her name was Joan Gans Cooney. As a public television producer, she was creating some of the most provocative and challenging programming of the civil rights era on New York's public television station,
Wham.
WNDT. At a dinner party in 1966, a conversation between her and Roy Morissette, an executive at the notable nonprofit, the Carnegie Corporation, sparked an interesting question. Could television be used to teach children? Complaints of the abundance of sex and violence on television, as well as the influence of advertisements, had brought upon a national debate as to the negative effects these trends could be having on the children watching. There were a few popular programs directed at young children, such as Captain Kangaroo, but shows such as this were the outliers. While the entertainment aspects
shit, I didn't mean to do that.
were great, the execution of the educational aspects was lacking.
So sad.
Morissette, who was also an experimental psychologist, wondered if a program designed primarily to educate children could be successful. Gans Cooney,
Okay,
known
so
for never
if
being
that's the
afraid to
case,
step
then
outside
the
of
other
her
one
comfort
won't be
zone,
over here.
found the proposition interesting. After the conversation, she secured research funding for an educational children's program. She spoke to many experts in the field of
Fuck
early
off.
childhood development and educational media. When she returned with her report, titled The Potential Uses of Television in Preschool Education, WNDT rejected it. After this, she left the station,
Blah.
joining Morissette at the Carnegie
Blah.
Corporation in a full-time role. Over the next
Blah.
2 years, Gans Cooney and Morissette sought funding for their program, starting the nonprofit production company, the Children's Television Workshop. The two would eventually raise over $8 million for the show, spending a large amount on research alone. Gans Cooney would be appointed as the executive director of the Children's
Unexpected
Television
threat
Workshop,
emerges.
a monumental achievement in the male-dominated and biased television industry. She and Morissette would begin to grow the team, eventually adding television writer and
Blam.
director John Stone to help with the show's creative development. It became clear through the research process that in order to capture the attention of preschool children, the program would need to be fast-paced, visually colorful, and creative in its
I need to
execution.
get to the end, right?
Gans Cooney pointed to television commercials as a
Time to
component
run.
to the type of segments the show would need to have. Luckily, if she needed high-quality creative commercials, Stone knew the perfect person to do it.
Hello there. My name is Jim Henson.
Let's
and I'm
go.
a puppeteer. I'm called a puppeteer because I work with puppets.
Okay, you're gonna love this story. Greatest story in the world.
Gaming. Alright, that was very
In the summer of
worthwhile.
1968, it was business as usual at Muppets Inc., now operating under
need
the
to
new
find an
name,
epic
Henson
fate.
Associates. The
That's what I
company
need
was
to
still
do.
producing entertaining commercials for a variety of clients. Jim and his team continued to appear on variety shows performing Muppet skits, and the Muppets were creating the occasional television special and pilot. Two pilots,
Where's Dementor over here? I
1962's
saw
Tales
one.
of the Tinker D and 1964's
Where
The Land
are
of the
they?
Tinker D, featuring a group of medieval Muppets in a fairy tale kingdom, never saw the light of day. In 1965, Jim had been asked to bring the Muppets onto a pilot for a Snow White parody being developed by John Stone for CBS. Jim and Stone hit it off, and the duo would collaborate
Blam.
on other projects, including an episode for NBC's Experiment in Television, a program that was satisfying Jim's passion for experimental film. Now, in mid-1968, they were a few months away from shooting the project that came from the Snow White parody, although the program had moved from CBS to ABC
Oh.
and the leading princess had been
Okay,
changed to
alright,
Cinderella.
I get it.
After Stone joined the Children's
Okay.
Television Workshop, he would not hesitate to invite Jim
Is there
to
not
some
like
of
a
the developmental
Fates
meetings.
thing
Jim shyly sat
that you
in
can
the back
just
of
look
the
at?
conference room, slouching low in his chair as he would often do. When he was
I think there
finally
is.
introduced to Gans Cooney, his work preceded him. Jim's quiet nature was overshadowed by the Muppets' reputation for the loud and the chaotic, and those at CTW, especially Gans Cooney, were thrilled that he might bring that energy to their new show.
Okay,
Jim,
that wasn't
on
what
the
I thought
other
it was
hand,
going to be.
was hesitant. If he provided the Muppets for the preschool program, he could risk the thing he wanted most, a primetime Muppet series. Using the Muppets for the young demographic could solidify their reputation as children's entertainment, a verdict that would be detrimental to any pitch for a family
39.
or adult-style Muppet show.
38.
However,
Okay.
this concern was
Other
overshadowed
area.
by the mere fact that he respected what Gans Cooney and CTW was doing. They were pushing the boundaries.
Wait, these
of
were worse,
television,
right?
a personal goal of his as well. Plus, he couldn't deny that the format that they were describing was perfect for him and the Muppets. He eventually agreed to work for the show, believing that, due to the unpredictable nature of children's programming,
Let's
it would
see.
probably only
Let's look
last
back
a
over
month or
here
two
and see what's
anyways.
over there.
Jim demanded his typical condition, that he own the rights to any Muppet characters he created for the program. During negotiations, Jim would end up allowing a 50-50 split of any character merchandising from the show between him and CTW.
Okay,
Hence,
44,
Gans'
that's
team
the level
began
I'm
in
at.
1969, and Jim and Stone's Cinderella spoof was set to film in late 1968. The hour-long special, called Hey Cinderella, received mixed reviews when it aired in the spring of 1969. The most notable part of the special would be that it officially completed Kermit's transition from abstract monster to frog, a gradual transformation in design that produced the recognizable version of the beloved
God,
character.
I just need to get to level 45 and then I would be
Throughout
doing another
1969, Jim and his team
Black
worked to produce
Mage
their
level
scenes
thing.
for the CTW project.
I just gotta kill this?
The Muppets
Okay.
would create small insert segments
I'm
teaching
not
children about letters
afraid.
and numbers that would then be placed in
kind of
between the show's
afraid.
street segments, which featured the main
Kind of
storyline of human
afraid.
actors. Jim took creative liberty
Oh.
with his part of the show, not only
Cool.
creating Muppet segments, but shooting live action and
Got
animated
here just in
segments as
time.
well. One of
Let's
the
go.
first assignments for Henson was to create the pitch reel for the show, which had recently been given the name Sesame Street.
Hey, these kids can't read or write, can they? Then how's about we call the show Hey Stupid?
Hey, stupid.
Owned.
What are we gonna do for a title? Pharaoh? Why don't you call your show Sesame Street? My entire
Sesame
career as a
Street.
TV educator nipped in the... What was that? Kermit. Why, you're a genius. Mwah. Yeah. Sesame Street. I love it. The kids will love it. I can see it. Up there in lights, the Children's Television Workshop presents Sesame Street.
New Muppets would need to be creative for the
So
puppet
true.
segments
It
of Sesame
does.
Street. Two of the residents would be a pair
49.
of named Bert and
Ah.
Ernie, performed by Frank Oz and Jim respectively. The gruff, stern Bert
Shit.
would be constantly
Where do I
pestered by the
go?
squeaky-voiced, goofy Ernie, not unlike the more serious Oz and the often goofy Henson. The comedic relationship between Ernie and Bert was immediate, likely because Oz and Henson's friendship was so strong. A semi-new character was a blue, googly-eyed monster with a large appetite performed by Oz, utilizing a painfully gravelly voice. The character had evolved from previous Muppets that the team had used in various commercials throughout the
Kablam.
years, and throughout the first season of Sesame Street, he would be given the name Cookie Monster. Kermit would also be used in many segments to teach concepts, acting as one of the few mature Sesame Street Muppets. A few test cuts of the show were created using Jim's segments and other footage shot by CTW, and the episodes were shown to the show's
Lord, oh, look at that.
demographic. These early tests
Let's go.
revealed that children's attentions dropped significantly during the show's street segments in which only human actors were shown. It was then decided
I don't
that
need
Muppets
these,
would need
but
to be added to the
it's a
main
quest.
setting of the program. This wasn't exactly good news for Jim. He could easily provide the show's
Let's go.
inserts, as he could create them in bulk on his
Oh, I
own
should,
shooting schedule.
upgrade
But
my
becoming
companion.
members of a cast would
I
mean a
can't.
more strenuous time
Sag.
commitment. He could assign his fellow performers Frank Oz or Jerry Nelson to the post, but they had proven to be indispensable in the Muppets' year-round work on various projects.
Subduing the
This meant
subprime.
Jim needed new talent. So as he had done year after year, he returned to the
Alright.
Puppeteers of America convention, this time seeking out a young puppeteer named Carol Spinney, who he had met a few years prior. He convinced Spinney to come work on Sesame Street full-time, performing two characters in the street segments, a large childlike yellow bird named Big Bird, and a grumpy, trash-throwing orange monster named Oscar the Grouch. The position was perfect for Spinney, as he seemed to excel in solo performances as opposed to a member of an ensemble. He set up shop in New York in 1969, and he would immediately give life to the full-bodied Big Bird puppet, performing him as a naive, curious character that children could relate to. At the urging of Jim, he thought the character could be very popular with the audience. Popular would be an understatement.
Let's go, Big Bird. Big Bird Pog.
Sesame Street premiered on November 10th, 1969 on national educational television. The show instantly became popular among the young children tuning in, and it would start a national dialogue on the roles and responsibilities of children's entertainment. The show featured a diverse cast of human characters, and it would have to overcome widespread racism and prejudice. But the decision to feature a realistic cast was one of the show's best. There
Not
were a
good,
few
not
critics
good.
during its first few months on the air, but the consensus seemed to be that Sesame Street was a groundbreaking and incredible show, one that would remain on the air and in the minds of children for years to come. This was great news for everyone except Jim Henson. While he was thrilled the show was successful, he was even more happy to see his 50% merchandising sales over the next few years. The popularity of Sesame Street, largely thanks to his and the Muppets' contributions, had realized his worst fear. He was now a children's puppeteer. This wouldn't become an issue right away, as he made plans to capitalize off the Sesame Street success with other Muppet specials for children. When he would eventually try to step outside of this demographic, he would learn just how strong of a reputation Sesame Street had given him. With the flexibility of the show's shooting schedule thanks to Spinney's work, Jim pursued a script for a children's special written by Jewel entitled The Great Santa Claus Switch, in which an evil magician takes Santa's place on Christmas Eve to steal from homes. The script had been rejected countless times over the past few years, but to Jim's delight, Ed Sullivan, who had frequently invited the Muppets on his program, offered to air the special in place of an episode of his show. The good news meant that Henson would have to hire additional volunteers, and in the summer of 1970, Claus, Nelson, and Henson opened auditions for additional Muppet performers.
Shit, get out of here.
This resulted in 2 new Muppets on the team, Fran Brill and Richard Hunt. Both were a perfect fit for the Muppets. The Great Santa Claus Switch saw the introduction of a group of monsters named the Frackles as the henchmen for the film's villain. These would continue to be used in other Muppet works, and one Frackle, referred to as the Cigar Box Frackle, would eventually evolve a
Alright, bro, I get it, bro.
The Great Santa Claus Switch was well received, but had little cultural impact upon its premiere in December of 1970. Jim, pleased with the results, was already on to his next project. The next year, Henson began development on a follow-up to Cinderella, now billed as the anthology series Tales from Muppetland. The second film in the series, The Frog Prince, would be filmed in March of 1971. The film featured Kermit alongside a new cast of Muppet frogs, including the small Robin performed by Jerry Nelson.
They call me Sir Robin, the Brave.
A new full-body Muppet would also be introduced, an ogre named Sweetums, performed by Richard Hunt. The growing fan base of Sesame Street resulted in more attention for Tales from Muppetland. The team would shoot another special for the series,
I think I'm doing this right.
Musicians of Brennan, in 1972, adding a full cast of rats and chickens to the Muppets. While the ensemble of Muppet performers was enough to fulfill the various projects, the Muppet Workshop needed additional hands. Builder Don Salim, a master
trying to figure out the AoE
schmixture, the talented Bonnie Erickson, would be joined by 2 new designers, Franz Vizakis, a builder that specialized in adding unique mechanisms to each puppet, and Dave Goles, a puppeteer with little confidence in his performances. The workshop was now preparing for a Broadway show starring the Muppets that Jim had been pitching to investors, titled An Evening with the Muppets. Plans for the show would be canceled in late 1973, and Jim set his sights back on television. His hope was to secure a series of Muppet holiday specials, or ideally, a weekly show. Henson, Oz, and Nelson would come into office after office, getting rejected by executive after executive, who was either uninterested or confused by the pitches. The consistent concern seemed to be that puppets, including the dynamic Muppets, were more children's entertainment, as proved by Sesame Street. Luckily, Jim would eventually convince one of the suits, a young, energetic executive at ABC named Michael Eisner.
Michael Eisner. What a fucking little bitch ass.
Pilot for a weekly Muppet series. While Jim imagined the series as a disjointed variety show starring the Muppets and human guest stars, for this pilot he wanted to explore one of his Muppet holiday special concepts.
Okay, bro.
Deciding
All right,
on the
bro.
Muppet Valentine show. Jim and his team would shoot the special in late 1973 and finish it in January of 1974. The show was written by Jewel and co-writer Jerry Ross, and Jim's hope for a human guest star would be fulfilled with Mia Farrow joining the cast of the Muppets. The show had an interesting format. It was hosted by a Muppet named Wally, the show's screenwriter that was having a difficult time writing about love. The Muppets, living in a house with overgrown foliage, helped him describe the feeling of love from each of their own twisted perspectives. The show would also implement a variety of musical numbers throughout. Other
Gotta be in the light.
included the army of frogs from the Frog Prince, a Frackle, Kermit, who was given a hilarious musical fantasy segment with the song Froggy Went A-Courting.
The bigger they are, the harder they fall. The bigger they are, the harder they fall, and you're gonna fall, big mouth and all.
And a few newcomers. The new Muppets included Brewster, a Muppet both designed and performed by Dave Goles in his first step outside of the workshop, Mildred, Miss Mousy, and Thog, all performed by Jerry Nelson. George the Janitor,
Kablam.
performed by Frank Oz. And a maniac arsonist named Crazy Donald, performed by semi-frequent performer John Lovelady. There were also a new race of Muppets from the fictional planet of Tuesday, and one of the show's segments featured the species demonstrating their alien mating. The 25-minute-long pilot aired on January 30th, 1974. Critics and audiences loved the energetic and funny special, and ABC opened the door for Jim to produce more holiday specials and pilots. Later that year, the Muppets would appear on Herb Albert and the Teapot Brass, a special starring the jazz musician in which the Muppets would add a comedic element to the band's set. The Often Forgot special is notable in that one of the Muppet interruptions featured a newly built character, and in less than 2 minutes of screen time, a star was born.
Piggy, come on in here, Piggy. Herbie, I'd like to meet Piggy. Piggy, oh, this is Herbie, baby. This is your letter to Sesame Street. But tell him all about it. Beautiful, beautiful.
What are some of the other puppets that you Oh, I guess the ones on Sesame Street.
What the hell? Come on.
Well, I think you're
Kablam.
We're working on an adult television show right now, and we're working on a theater show, so we have to do a few things for adults.
Could I ask Kermit something?
Sure.
Jim would pitch another pilot for a weekly
Sure,
show
he
to
says.
ABC, called The Muppet Nonsense Show, which would include more sketches and short segments. This time, however, he was determined to reach a more adult audience to further distance himself from Sesame Street, which was by this point a cultural phenomenon. When the second pilot was greenlit, Jim would title it The Muppet Show, Sex and Violence, to emphasize the targeted adult audience and comment on the current state of television. The show would be shot in mid-December. The pilot centered around a group of Muppets putting on a variety show, culminating into a pageant for the 7 Deadly Sins, each represented by a grotesque, stylized Muppet. The show was also a lot more quick-paced and cynical than the Muppets' Valentine show, and the Muppet Workshop was tasked with creating an even larger ensemble of new characters. This would include a new house band called the Electric Mayhem, featuring a keyboardist, Dr. T, performed by Henson, a guitar player, Janice, performed by Fran Brill,
What are they focusing
a
on?
saxophone player, Zoot, played by Dave Goelz, the sarcastic bassist, Floyd, performed by Jerry Nelson, and the wild and violent drummer, Animal, performed by Frank Oz. There were also a series of skits featuring 2 elderly gentlemen, Statler, performed by Richard Hunt, and Woolworth, performed by Henson, who passed the time making small talk in their antiquated home.
Until the waiter says, "Excuse me, but you're dancing with my umbrella."
There was a cooking show segment with a Swedish chef demonstrating some unconventional cooking methods and less than accurate Swedish. The chef had been born from
Let's go,
previous
Swedish
guest
chef.
skits that the Muppets had performed. The character was a live hand puppet, similar to Ralph and Ernie. In typical live hand Muppet performances, the head and left arm are performed by the primary puppeteer providing the voice, while a second performer would operate the right hand, a job referred to as simply right-handing. The Swedish chef was unique in that the character would be voiced by Jim, but he would only be controlling the head. The hands would both be controlled by a second puppeteer, Richard Hunt. In
Let's go, gaming.
with his actual human hands being used. This created an entirely different performance style, as Jim would be providing humorous dialogue and facial expressions, not necessarily knowing what the hands of the puppet would do next.
I'm gonna freak. I'm gonna freak.
The sex and violent Swedish chef skits also featured Chinese subtitles, another odd element to the skit. Running the show backstage was Floyd, Sam the Eagle, a large blue eagle with a strong moral backbone played by Oz, and perhaps the most peculiar addition to the Muppet cast in Sex and Violence, the show's host, a nasally, almost drowsy frontman named Nigel, played by Jim.
What we have here is the conference room, which is sort of the nerve center of the place.
Nigel had little character or charm, especially considering his role as host. Kermit
I was
and Ralph,
interrupted.
the
Bro, what the
established
fuck?
dynamic and recognizable Muppet
Oh,
host would appear
sad.
only briefly, as would various other Muppets that Jim had built for the previous pilots and specials.
Well, I might be able to get you a job on an educational show for kids. Well, I was with Jimmy Dean, but nobody remembers me anymore.
A variety of segments were created for the pilot, including Mount Rushmore, in which the 4 presidents would tell bad jokes,
Kablam.
and a fake movie review segment called Return to Beneath the Planet of the Pigs, a Planet of the Apes parody featuring a new version of Piggy, performed by Fran Brill, and a mad scientist pig named Dr. Naga, played by Jerry Nelson. There was also a segment called At the Dance, where a series of gags were played off as Muppets danced in a ballroom. The special ended with a wide shot revealing the
Kablam.
performers beneath the puppets, an idea originally conceived for the Muppet Broadway show, and an ending
I
that
am
would have
gaming.
presumably continued should the show have been picked up. However, this was not the case. ABC was unhappy with the pilot from the beginning, urging Jim to change the name and the special. He stood firm on the sex and violence title, which seemed to be more funny to him than anyone else. Another issue was the show's characters, whose personalities did not work together as an ensemble. It seemed that in each scene from the pilot's A-plot, a different character was halting the energy, whether it be Nigel with his sleepy, dull delivery, or Sam with his strict obliviousness. It didn't help that most of the time the characters backstage were not preparing for the show, but were instead playing board games. On top of this, the show's pacing was atrocious, and the editing was too quick in some segments and too long in others. The At the Dance and the Swedish Chef segments, which both only had enough footage to be a single insert, were chopped up and placed throughout, with some bits lasting less than 10 seconds.
Well, you see, this show jumps from place to place. You'll get used to it.
Despite these issues, Jim hoped that this was the pilot that would solidify a weekly Muppet show. Jim made the rounds on late-night shows, heavily promoting the airing of the pilot.
I should have quick casted the Fire 3. It probably would have done more damage, right? That makes
When the
sense.
reviews came in, it was clear that sex and violence had not resonated with audiences. While some found it entertaining, the majority of viewers felt the humor didn't work, and ABC decided against picking up the series. Jim was hopeful that another network would, but was disappointed when others rejected the concept as well. Some because of the response to the special, and others because of the same reason Jim had been hearing again and again. They felt puppets were for children.
I'm
more
slanging
than
fireballs.
If a Muppet TV series was going to happen, Jim would need help.
Let's
So he reached out to
go.
a person that he believed could make his dream come true.
God, they
An
rotate.
IBM executive named David Laser that Jim had worked with in the past to provide a few funny short films for IBM board meetings. Laser would join the Muppets team in a producing capacity, and his knowledge of business and energy would prove to be an asset that the team had been missing. The first step was to create a pitch to networks. This would take the form of a
Gaming.
25-minute reel featuring the Muppets in a variety of settings. in
La,
short skits,
la,
in
la,
effective
la, la.
appearance, and in musical numbers. The climax of the reel would feature an enthusiastic Muppet pitchman making
would
his
I need
case to
that?
the network executives to greenlight a Muppet show.
Friends, the United States of America needs the Muppet Show, and you should buy this show. Now, we're not pulling any punches here. I mean, there's nothing subtle about this pitch.
okay, all right.
So buy the show and put it on the air, and we'll all be famous. And we'll all get temperamental and hard to work with, but you won't care, because we'll all make a lot of money. And God will look down on us and smile on us, and he will say, let them have a 40 share.
Jim's agent, Bernie Brillstein, would shop the reel around to no avail. During this process, Brillstein
Oh,
made
I
a
didn't
deal
wanna do
with
that.
ABC to have the Muppets appear
Why
on
did
the
I-
new
why
live
did-
variety
why did I
show
flick
debuting
like
in
that?
the
That was
fall
kinda
of
cringe.
1975. The Muppets were brought on to assuage the fears of executives that the new show, named Saturday Night Live, would be too edgy as it took on the hot topics of the day. This was perfect for Jim's attempts to get the Muppets into the adult comedy scene. Warren Michaels, SNL's showrunner and also a client of Brillstein, enjoyed Jim's work and was happy to have him perform a skit on each episode of the show. Jim's recurring sketch would be called The Land of Gorge and would feature
Hello?
mature alien
Okay, there
Muppets
we
in
go.
adult situations. The Muppets were designed by recent Workshop edition Michael Critt, and the bizarre aliens certainly looked the part for late night. However, the Muppets and SNL were not a match. Per Writers Guild rules, all the sketches had to be written by SNL staff writers, and their subtle, sarcastic style did not lend itself well to the more slapstick Muppets. That said, the writers weren't necessarily trying their hardest. They would have much rather written the other sketches, and those forced to write for the Muppets were often angry. Head writer
Damn.
Michael O'Donoghue reportedly scoffed, quote, "I won't write for felt." The cast also did not enjoy giving up airtime to the Muppets. Cast
That's
members
actually,
John
that's
Hughes
not a lie.
used
That's
the
a very
phrase,
funny line.
"mucking puppets." It was difficult for Jim to bring his team every week into a tense situation where they clearly weren't welcome. Although despite the behind-the-scenes drama, he would never speak ill of the SNL staff publicly. And when asked, he would be quick to praise the talents of Lorne Michaels, who he had a deep respect for. Michaels appreciated Jim's work, but it was clear early on to the both of them that the Muppets did not belong on SNL. Luckily, Jim wouldn't have to live in 30 Rock forever. A British television producer named Lou Grade had been following the work of Jim and the Muppets for the past few years, and he was interested in discussing a potential Muppet TV
Gosh.
series. One of his employees located in
I
New York
fucked it.
invited Brillstein and Laser to a meeting.
fucked it, Lois.
The two passed on the 25-minute pitch reel, and the next day, a deal was made. A 24-episode first season with a total budget of $3 million would be produced. The episodes would be distributed via a new practice called primetime syndication, in which a show would be produced independently and
I'm
then sold
skid.
station by station. After the deal was reached, 5 CBS-owned and operated stations bought the show's first season. Grade's biggest ad for Brillstein was that Jim and the Muppets shoot the new show at his studio in London. Brillstein agreed without even consulting Jim, and after a deal was reached, he called Henson to tell him the news. Jim's response was simple, "I love you." The Muppets were going to the UK.
Let's go.
This episode of Defunct TV is sponsored by Squarespace.
I should have used Squarespace.
Yes, Cody should have used Squarespace. Because with Squarespace's all-in-one website design
Okay, bro.
tools,
All right, bro.
creating a beautiful, well-performing website is just a few clicks away. Best of all, when it comes to maintaining it, it is easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So you can avoid those nasty 404 errors and even nastier 404 whacks. And now, Squarespace is offering a free trial.
Buy my product! Buy my product! What are you doing, boss? I'm trying to get the word out about my brand since you can't build me a website, Cody. Buy my product! But boss, I signed us up for Squarespace, like you said, and now your website looks great. Buy my product! Cody, my boy, that's great to hear!
In early
Let's go, Cody.
1976, writer Jerry Jewell was living in California with his wife Susan. It had been 15 years since Jewell had become the first employee of the now famous puppeteer Jim Henson. He had begun work on Sam and Friends in Maryland on WRC-TV for the last few months of its run. Immediately afterwards, Jewell followed Henson and his family to New York City, helping him build his team of puppeteers and beginning his work as Henson's go-to writer, penning the Tinkerdy pilots and the script for The Great Santa Claus Switch. In 1969, Jerry and Susan informed Jim that they would be moving out to Los Angeles to continue his writing career. Jim wished him well, and the two continued to work together, albeit remotely.
Blammo.
Jewell would help write for Sesame Street, the Tales from Muppetland specials, and the first pilot for Jim's Muppet Show, The Muppets Valentine Show. However, Jewell would not help write
Bro, where'd
Jim's
the tank at?
1975 pilot, The Muppet Show, Sex and Violence, and the lack of his voice was apparent. Jewell was always praised for his grip on character and structure, two things that the Sex and Violence people were clearly missing.
Oh, did I
In
level up?
1975,
What happened?
Jewell
Oh, I got the
started
item.
writing.
That's
On
what
the other
happened.
end was Jim Henson, holding a list of talking points to break the good and bad news to his friend. The good news was that Jim had finally been greenlit for a weekly Muppet Show. The bad news was that one of the conditions was that Jewell could not be head writer, as a more experienced comedy writer was to be given the title in order to
Kablooey.
the studio. Jewell agreed to write the show without the head position. This surely meant that he would have to move back to New York. But Jim had one more piece of news. The show wasn't shooting in New York, or even Los Angeles. Jim was asking Jerry to follow him to England.
Let's go, England.
Hello there. My name is Jim Henson, and I'm a puppeteer. You call a puppeteer because
I wasn't even paying attention to my MP. Thunder! Shit. Let's go, gaming. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-da-da-da-da. Alright, bro. Now we move back up here.
Jack Burns was a comedian in the truest of senses. He had been a member of the Second City improv troupe, and he had formed two successful comedy duos, one
Now
with
that's
George
gaming.
Carlin and another with Avery Schreiber. He had acted in a number of television shows, and he had written for the Laugh-In-inspired variety show,
Inged.
Hee-Haw. In producer Lord Lou Grade's mind, he was the perfect type of head writer for The Muppet Show. In November of 1975, developmental meetings between Burns, Jewell, and Henson were held. The first thing to nail down was the premise and format. The Muppet Valentine Show and The Muppet Show Sex and Violence had a few similarities that they could draw from. For one, they were both variety shows with musical
Alright.
numbers and short skits. This is the format in which the Muppets thrived, but the series would need a premise that helped hold these segments together.
Triple
The
decker.
Muppets Valentine Show was too heavy on its specific story to be replicated, and it could have used a few more skits. The Muppet Show Sex and Violence needed less skits and more character. Another similarity between the two
Look at a
specials
hat.
was the show within a show format. In
Wood
the
hat
Muppets
again.
Valentine Show, Wally was writing the screenplay. In the
Gotta
Muppet
clear
Show
my
Sex and
inventory.
Violence, Nigel and friends were putting on a pageant. The concept that emerged from the brainstorming sessions was a group of Muppets attempting to put on a vaudeville show in an old theater. The concept was nothing groundbreaking, and the team wasn't 100% confident in the idea. One positive of the format was the ability to bring on a human guest star for each episode. Mia Farrow's role in the Muppet Valentine special seemed to prove that the audience needed a human to ground the show, or at the very least, give the Muppets something to play off of. On top of this, a list of celebrity guest stars would help sell the show to more stations. The idea was great, but the execution would be difficult. Jim's agent, Bernie Brillstein, was tasked with finding celebrities that would be okay with traveling to London for a week to shoot a syndicated puppet show that didn't pay that well,
not those.
which, if you can believe it, many declined.
We're good.
Brillstein had to resort to calling in favors from friends and clients, and he was able to secure dancer Juliet Prowse and actress Connie Stevens for the show's 2 pilot episodes. These episodes would be filmed, edited, and shopped around to any U.S. stations that would be willing to purchase the syndication rights to air the show.
Okay, let's do
backwards and a huge risk.
the quiz.
Gray believed in Jim and the Muppets, and he was giving them a huge opportunity. With Brillstein, Jewell, Burns, and Henson's producer, David Laser, on board, Jim needed to assemble the rest of his team. His regular puppeteering team, including Frank Oz, Dave Goelz, and Richard Hunt, would make the trip overseas. Unfortunately, performer Jerry Nelson would not be able to travel for the filming of the pilot episodes. Henson would bring 2 more performers he had worked with, John Lovelady and Aaron Oskar. Jim would also bring another puppeteer out with him. His wife, Jane, Jim's first performing partner, had focused on raising their family, which had grown to 5 children: Lisa, Brian, Cheryl, John, and Heather. She was still able to find time to help Jim when he needed it, providing additional puppeteering on many projects, often going uncredited. Jim and Jane's relationship had become strained over the past few years. Jim's hectic schedule was not easy to deal with, and although he made time for his family, he was definitely torn between 2 worlds. Communication was another issue between Jim and Jane. Jim's soft, gentle nature, which his friends and coworkers admired, was not helpful in serious conversations pertaining to the family or their relationship. Despite the 2 growing apart, Jane remained an essential asset of the Muppets. For one, she had a sharp eye for talent, and Jane would help Jim in recruiting puppeteers.
Let's go, Jane.
Jane was also one of the few people that could tell Jim the truth about his work, even if it wasn't positive. Jim didn't take criticism exceedingly well, and Jane was one of the few people he trusted for an honest opinion. Another was Frank Oz, who with his direct and aggressive nature, had no issue in telling Jim how he felt. It was this dichotomy that made
Let's go Thunder Mastery.
And the juxtaposition that had created
Let's fucking go.
2 of the most popular Muppet characters. Even with a full team of puppeteers, writers, and crew from Grade's Elstree Studios, there were still a lot of frogs and dogs and bears and chickens and whatevers that needed to be brought onto the show. Many characters from previous specials would be brought back as performers or workers on the show within a show. The Swedish chef, performed by Henson with hands now puppeteered by Oz, would perform as zany cooking demonstrations. George the janitor, performed by Oz, would be the show's janitor. Mildred, who was passed between performers, was added to various sketches despite not having a role in the show. Sam Eagle would return as the show's morally upright censor and fine art curator. The full Electric Mayhem band would be the house band, and many of the members would perform in the orchestra. Crazy Harry, performed by Lovelady, would be the show's unpredictable pyrotechnics expert, and the elderly gentleman from Sex and Violence, Statler and Waldorf, performed by Richard Hunt.
I don't care, give me Thunder.
Were given a seat in the theater's balcony, where they would comment on the show and heckle the cast.
I love it, I love it! Of course he loves it. He's the kind of guy who plants poison ivy.
Other
Got him.
Muppets, such as
Owned.
Snoodles and the cast of Frogs, Pigs, Chickens, Frackles, and the interchangeable Muppet Whatnots would be used as needed. Since Jim and his team had been constantly appearing on variety shows performing skits for nearly 2 decades, the Muppets already had a few acts to integrate into the show. A skit named Phenomena, which Jim had first used for Sesame Street in 1969, had been evolving for over 6 years. The skit featured a nonsense song originally written for an Italian sex documentary that just so happened to be extremely catchy.
Dun, dun, dun.
Newer evolved Muppets would be created for the 2 pilots, including a singing duo named Wayne and Wanda, performed by Hunt and Oskar respectively, that could never seem to make it through one of their performances. A Muppet newsman, performed by Henson, that would quickly run on stage to give
Let's go
news
Mossy Pillar.
flashes. Dr. Bunsen Honeydew, performed by Goelz, who would give demonstrations of the new technology being developed by Muppet Labs, and Hilda, the show's seamstress, performed by Oskar, who was typically involved in the show's backstage plot. Another singer would be the prima donna pig, Miss Piggy, performed interchangeably by Richard Hunt and Frank Oz. In one sketch in the Juliet Prowse pilot, she was voiced by both Oz and Hunt, with Oz providing some spoken dialogue and Hunt providing the vocals.
Yes, my love.
Dave Goelz, who was still helping in the Muppet workshop, was more or less forced by Jim to perform on the Muppet Show. Jim saw potential in the Puppeteer. Even when Goelz was uncertain about his talents,
Gaming?
Jim wanted him to play the Muppet Show's President Playback, named Gods of the Great, between a Muppet at random collection, a cigar box round, and a great Santa Claus sketch. Cameos Goelz and saying, this came from himself. Goelz' lack of confidence in his own performances created a very hypocritical concept. On one hand, he was a daredevil for the movie's performances were high art, getting mad at the audience when they were just as a text and gave rubber tire to the music of the flight of the Bumblebee. On the other hand, he was a sad, pathetic character with a baby voice.
Really? You think I'm emotionally mature enough to put your raggedy hand?
I like him. He's my favorite boy.
Consolation from the nervous Goelz. The great Frank Oz was having trouble establishing his main character as well. The show's resident comedian would be a bear
fuck.
Fozzie. Oz gave the character a low, gruff voice to deliver his unbearably bad jokes with.
All right, everybody, reach for the floor.
The character also had a unique mechanism that allowed him to lower and raise the corners of his mouth, allowing him to frown and smile. Oz was one, if not the best.
Oh, I get it. We kill the plane fissures as quick as possible, so that the boys don't get out.
Often quipping, ready to wiggle some dollars before performances. Still, his comedic timing and delivery, especially when paired with Jim, was next to none. Ernie and Bert were proof of this, but recreating that magic with new characters was proving to be difficult. Fozzie became the victim of scabbard later, but the balance wasn't right. Similar acts, such as one
Shit.
by comedian
Well, I'm committed.
Unfortunately, Fozzie's constant failures were more sad than funny, which held his character back. Finally, Jim needed a main character.
Got more boys? Yeah, we do.
The host of the Sex and Violence pilot, the drowsy Nigel, was cast for the role of conductor of the orchestra, and Jim was left searching for a lead. The obvious choices were Rolf and Kermit. Rolf had seemed to run his course in mainstream popularity, but Jim would not waste him as he had done in Sex and Violence. Rolf would be the show's resident pianist, and he would be given his own segments. This left
gaming.
Jim with Kermit, one of his most recognizable Muppets, especially among the adult crowd. Jim had been working with Kermit for over 20 years by this point, and the character had yet to find his footing. On Sesame Street, he was the adult interacting with children or Muppets that acted like him. But even on the preschool program, he had an unrestrained anger to him, and he often came off as rude and grumpy. Also, Kermit's moonlighting on late night shows.
Come on, Kermit. He's doing his best.
In 1970, he provided lead-in segments to commercials airing during Haste and Rebel, and a few critics were quick to point out that a Sesame Street character should be used to sell buyers. Still, there were glimpses of depth in the film. In 1970, he would sing a song on Sesame Street written by songwriter Joe Riposo, titled Being Green. The song
I keep misclicking him, cringe.
reflect on his ordinary and possibly bold public. In the final verse of the song, Kermit realizes that the way he is
Gaming.
beautiful, and that it's the way he wants to be.
Are there more? Let's go. There's not any more.
By many famous
Gaming.
musicians, including Frank Sinatra and Lena Horne. When Kermit's character developed on Sesame Street, finally lightening up a bit, his personality split in two. In the morning, he could be seen talking gently to children and teaching them the alphabet, but in the evening, he would be on Jim's arm appearing on late-night shows. Here, he would act as a foil to the kind Jim, once again coming off as rude. Jim's decision to place Kermit as the host of The Muppet Show would be one of the best decisions he would make, because it gave the character something he needed desperately: a home. As the showrunner, host, and boss of the bizarre group of weirdos that resided at The Muppet Show, Kermit could finally become an extension of Jim, who had a very similar role with his team, while also being able to get angry and yell, something Jim never did. After the character was given the job, he no longer came off as rude or grumpy. Instead, he was merely trying to make everything work with a group of people that were making it extremely hard for him. In this way, he was the show's most relatable character, and he would often take quiet moments to break the fourth wall, confiding in the audience.
Sometimes the crown weighs rather heavy on this little froggy head.
Kermit was one of the few characters that worked right away, whether he was
Let's go,
talking to a
Kermit.
guest in the show's talk spot or watching the performances with a horrified look off stage. The Juliet Prowse and Connie Stevens episodes were shot in January of 1976. After this, the performers returned to the United States to continue their work on Saturday Night Live, while Brillstein and Laser shopped the pilots around. With 2 episodes of The Muppet Show to display to programmers, they would be able to convince more stations to syndicate the independently produced show. After seeing a preview of the brand new Muppet Show, the consensus was unanimous. It was a resounding no. The show's pacing and format didn't work, and even Lou Grade's American producer believed the show's humor was too British. The show's intro, for instance, was way too long, featuring a full preview of the show to come. with multiple lines that would end up being cut, such as Kermit singing, "The show tonight will feature a lovely song or two. We also have some dancing, if that's what pleases you," and Fozzie Bear will tell you some jokes you never knew, before finally singing, "To introduce our guest star, that's what I'm here to do." The backstage segments also fell flat, including a scene where Kermit asked one of the chorus girls out on a date, only to get rejected. Jim, never one to take criticism well, stewed in the rejection for a short while, before laughing it off. After all, the team had 22 more episodes to shoot, and they would clearly have to rework the 2 they had already made. Jim's entire career had been leading up to this moment, and while such a strong rejection of his work hurt deeply, he knew that the only possible way to move forward was to improve the show and hope the new product would be better received. Of course, Jim didn't say this.
That makes sense.
He just quietly muttered, "It's not the end of the world," and then had a drink with Laser. On
We're
May
good.
5th, 1976, Jim and his team sailed to London, leaving behind SNL, which had luckily been simple considering that no involved party had benefited from the collaboration.
They burned our scenery. We're no longer booked on the show, and they said we're puppets, and that we don't even have a lower half. But what do we do?
Don't look down.
Jane would stay with Jim for just the first few weeks of the 6 months he and the other Muppet performers would be in London before returning to look after their children. This left
We get over
Jim,
the rock.
Jewel,
Let's
Burns,
go
Oz,
easy.
Gold,
So easy for me
Hunt,
personally.
Lovelady, Oscar, and the crew at Grade's Elstree Studios to make the Muppet magic happen. Performer Jerry Nelson would join his friends to perform.
I bet there's some good love mets up here.
And Jim assigned Muppet builder Bonnie Erickson to set up a new workshop at Elstree Studios to create the endless amount of puppets Jim would need for the show. With everyone on board and settled in, there was only a few things left to do. It was time to play the music, and it was time to light the lights.
I got a pair of wizard gloves.
Just as Kermit was becoming the glue that held the rest of the Muppet cast together, Jim was the glue that held together his team. The Muppet Show ran on a tight schedule, and Jim could be found running back and forth between rehearsals, the editing room, the writing room, and anywhere else along the chain of production. Everyone knew the show needed to improve, but it was also clear that they had little time to do it. The first guest would be Broadway star Joel Grey. The first thing to fix was the characters. Oz would be given a new Fozzie puppet, with the frown mechanism being replaced with a new ability to wiggle the character's ears. Oz would also give Fozzie a new, higher-pitched voice. This added a bit of cuteness to the character, which paired nicely with his terrible comedy performances.
I don't approve of belly dancing. Why can't they dance on the floor like everyone else?
Burns and Jewel also wrote a storyline in which Fozzie was badgering the cast on his shows, which proved a great backstage storyline for the episode. The plot ended with Fozzie defeating Statler and Holden, a possible attempt to balance the dynamic between the community. One positive thing to pilots were the musical numbers. Jim's eccentric and diverse taste
Can he do it?
always been a part of the Muppet Ensemble's personality, and Jim had
Well, I don't like that.
every genre, ranging from novelty to bluegrass. The recording sessions for the Muppet songs was one of his favorite tastes in production, getting to have fun with all of his friends singing the songs he loved in funny voices. As he had done on Sam and Friends years prior, he would put odd twists on some of his favorite songs, such as an alien jazz number
Limo?
to a soft version of UFO Century. As many of the guests Will see was lining up for singers, the Muppet Show would feature music more than any other act. Another positive of this setup was the more the characters were singing, the less they were talking, giving the performers more time to figure out their characters. The recurring segments would also be constantly created, improved, or removed. The pun-filled At the Dance,
Wizard
a leftover
Dunban.
from the Sex and Violence pilot, would return despite the mixed feelings the writers and performers had toward it. And the lackluster Panel Discussions, a segment in which the Muppets tried and failed to engage in serious debates. And Talking Houses, a series of skits featuring talking homes delivering house and building-related punchlines, were created. The Joel Grey episode would be better than the previous two, and the Muppets took advantage of the guest talents by having him perform 2 great numbers. The next episode would star comedian Ruth Buzzy, and it would introduce Hunt's main character, a PA that constantly pestered Kermit, named Scooter. Scooter had a childlike persistence and
Let's go,
energy
Scooter.
similar to Hunt's own personality, and he would never stop talking, especially around Kermit, which was similar to Hunt's relationship with Jim, although Jim only pretended to be frustrated with Hunt in real life.
When I came into the thing, I was 18, and I was really energetic, and, I'd say, yeah, sure, everything you want to do, boss, no problem. I talked a lot like him, because he's my voice when I was younger, like this.
A breakthrough around this time was a moment in rehearsal for a scene with Piggy, in which Piggy was scripted to slap the frog.
I feel like I should start with Blizzard 3.
Performing Piggy during the scene, had her karate chop Kermit instead, screaming "Hi-ya" as she pummeled the frog counters. Everyone in the room was filled with laughter, and Oz saw death to Piggy's character for the first time. The next episode of the film, guest starring comedian Harvey Korman, would be a huge step forward. A new sketch, Veterinarian's Hospital, in which Ralph, playing the character Dr. Bob, spoofs the medical genre with his nurses and some clinically bad jokes, would be introduced.
How long have you been a nurse?
Well, what time is it?
Two memorable scenes would also come from this episode. In one, Fozzie's character seemed to solidify his place in the ensemble after dragging Kermit into a convoluted bit, making the frog give the punchline to his joke. A miscommunication between
I thought the
lead to one of the show's funniest bits.
thought I got the wizard what's it called? Their legs, yeah. Where'd it go? Oh, it's in my inventory.
Also in this episode was a musical number sung by Robin the Frog, performed by Jerry Nelson. Robin was one of Jim's childhood favorites, A.A. Milne's Halfway Down the Stairs. Robin's rendition of Halfway Down the Stairs would be one of the most memorable moments from season 1, and the sweet song
this is frustrating. Okay, alright, we're good.
Would also use another Milne favorite, Poddleston Pie, sung by Rolf in an episode guest star.
Nothing's wrong.
The show's next episode, with guest star Rita Moreno, would be the best one yet, and the improvements the team had made were apparent. The Muppet Mania just might work. Fozzie's given a great running gag back.
Everything's fine.
Hilarious dialogue with Kermit, and Rita Moreno's show-stopping.
Definitely not freaking out. Definitely not.
Animal distraction
For sure.
resulted in one of the show's first iconic moments. Since the episodes would be aired out of order, and the team believed that the syndicators would want to air the Moreno episode first, the writers would give Scooter a proper introduction for the show's 6th episode. Guest starring Jim Neighbors, fully explaining Scooter's role as a gopher and his relationship with his uncle, who happens to own the theater the Muppets perform in.
I'm Scooter. Cute.
I'm Scooter.
Cute name.
In episode 12, with guest star Peter
I gotta
Ustinov,
sell some shit.
Kermit would give a sweet rendition of Being Green after his performer seemed to be so infatuated with the guest star that they forgot about him completely. Brillstein, Laser, and Jim knew early on that finding guest stars for the show would be difficult, and they believed the only way to ensure more guests signing on was for the show's first guests to spread the word. This meant that the celebrities had to have a great time doing the show.
I'm just sell
It helped
some
that Jim was already well known and respected
thaumaturge stuff
and many stars loved
that I don't need anymore,
Laser
so I
took
can
responsibility of the
get
executive
space.
point of contact with the guests, always making sure they were comfortable. The show's format put a spotlight on the celebrities, as they were the only human in the episode. The guests were also asked what they would like to do, whether it be comedy bits, singing, or dancing, instead of simply asking them to do what they were known for. The conscious effort to make a good impression worked, and word quickly spread through the industry that guest starring on The Muppet Show was a great time.
Don't throw away
The constant work
those.
meant a constant paycheck for the already well-off Henson. Jim was not modest with his wealth, whether it was when he was younger, purchasing a Rolls Royce and driving it to his college graduation, or now, taking elaborate European vacations during the short breaks in production. He was just as quick to spoil those around him as he was himself, bringing his family on vacation with him, finding apartments for his crew,
Damn,
and
not
taking
much
the
to
Muppet
actually
performers
sell.
each guest star to an expensive wrap dinner after each episode was complete.
Oh, are
In
these the
August
same?
of 1976, Jim
They are
Henson
exactly the
briefly
same.
returned to New York, shooting inserts for Sesame Street
Right?
and promoting the Muppet
No.
Show on various programs. In September
This one
of
gives critical hit.
1976, the Rita Moreno episode of The Muppet Show premiered in the
Um,
United States. The episode
oh,
was warmly received,
and
but
I-
it was
oh.
not a smash hit. The humor still needed work, with some critics pointing out that Burns' style seemed to be influencing the show more than the Muppets. Jim was already on his way
What
back
do I
to
throw
London
away?
to shoot the remaining episodes of The Muppet Show's first season. The crew even went back and filmed additional scenes for the 2 pilots, even going as far as to explain some of the continuity errors.
Hey, Kermit. Hey, does this sound like John Wayne?
Will you get on stage, Fozzie?
Jim would add a memorable number with Scooter and Fozzie, Simon Smith and his Dancing Bear in the Julia Prowse episode, and Kermit would sing Lydia the Tattooed Lady in the Connie Stevens episode. The Muppet Show continued to release new episodes in the UK and US, with Brillstein and Laser
Where's
being able
my
to sell the show
chocobo
to
center
more
bag?
stations. After the filming of season 1 was complete,
Damn,
Jim and the
your
Muppets
boy's
returned to the
inventory is
United
getting
States,
full.
beginning work on another TV special, Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, an adaptation of a children's book of the same name. Emmett Otter would see Jim collaborating with songwriter Paul Williams, who had guest starred on episode 8 of The Muppet Show. The collaboration resulted in some of the catchiest songs in any Muppet special, and the sentimental ballad When the River Meets the Sea would be particularly memorable. It also featured some impressive puppet wizardry, including a radio-controlled Emmett Otter on a rowboat and other Muppets on snowmobiles. Still, Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas had trouble initially getting picked up by a television network, airing in Canada during 1977's Christmas season before landing on HBO in 1978, reaching far less viewership than Jim had hoped. The quaint special would grow in popularity over time, and it would eventually be regarded as a classic. Back in England, the popularity of The Muppet Show was skyrocketing. While it hadn't
Let's
fully
go,
caught
Muppet
on
Show.
in the States yet, The Muppet Show had created legions of fans, including both children and adults. It was even said that members of Parliament would gather water
Yeah, I know.
style
I have
every
it
Monday
open.
morning to discuss The Muppet Show episode from the night prior. In May 1977, The Muppets returned to London to begin work on a second season of The Muppet Show. Oscar and Lovelady would not return for the show's second season, and British actress Louise Gold would join the cast as a puppeteer. Brillstein had let head writer Jack Burns go. Burns and Henson had a few creative differences throughout the first season.
Good
and
for
it was
now.
no secret that Henson preferred the writing style of his friend Jerry Jewell. Jewell would take over the post as head writer, and the change between seasons would be apparent. For one, a cold open with Scooter and the guest star was added, and a new opening was filmed, removing Kermit's mid-song introduction of the guest star and Fozzie's joke, replacing it with a cutaway to Statler and Waldorf.
Well, it's downhill from here.
Many of the characters would be rebuilt, most notably Gonzo and
Okay.
Miss Piggy. Golds had found Gonzo's character toward the end of season 1, and with a new design, he was playing him as the king of the weirdos on The Muppet Show. Oz was now performing Miss Piggy full-time, no longer sharing the role with Hunt. Piggy's karate moves and attempts to upstage guest stars had made her one of The Muppet Show's most popular characters on the first
I gotta put
season,
those back.
despite her original intention as a background character. She would appear much more
Oh,
prominently.
nope,
going
nope, nope,
forward.
nope.
The At the Dance segments appeared less
That's not what I wanted.
frequently. Bunsen
Where'd he go?
Review's lab assistant Beaker, performed by Hunt, was added, and the
There we
panel
go.
discussions and talking house
Okay.
segments were removed. A new recurring skit, Pigs in Space,
Let's go.
was introduced and would become extremely popular among audiences.
Now we
Sketch,
move.
starring Miss Piggy, Link Hogthrob, performed by Henson, and Dr. Julia Strangeport, performed by Nelson, would spoof space operas such as Lost in Space and Star Trek. Another notable development in the season was Gonzo finding his love for chickens, who were given a hilarious performance of babyface in the Edgar Bergen episode. In an episode starring Bernadette Peters, Robin is established as Kermit's nephew. In this episode, he wants to run away from home after being ignored by his uncle and feeling down on himself. But Peters and subsequently the rest of the Muppets sing Just One Person, showing how much they care and believe in him.
Let's go.
Finding guest stars for season 2 was much easier.
Black Mage
Big
Bog.
names such as John Cleese, Steve Martin, Peter Sellers.
I like
Julie
the
Andrews,
think
and
what I like
international
most
ballet
is
sensation
the
Rudolph
managing
Correa
of your
would appear on
MP
the show.
gauge.
Two of Jim's personal inspirations, puppeteer Edgar Bergen and comedian Milton Berle, would even guest star. Muppet Mania finally hit the States in late 1977, with critics and audiences going wild over the show. The Muppets were awarded Entertainer of the Year by the American Guild of Variety Artists, as well as multiple Emmy nominations. A Kermit the Frog balloon would glide through the Macy's Thanksgiving Day
Oh,
parade.
big boy,
Jim and the
big
Muppets
boy.
approved every executive that turned them down wrong. Muppets
We do
were not
this
for
and then we
children.
do
They were for everyone. in
hunting
the
shit
truest
next.
sense of the word. Jim was thrilled, but his restless creative mind was not satisfied. Unlike Kermit the Frog, who would often get overwhelmed just trying to put on the show each week, Jim was always looking ahead for his next great adventure. It was as if time would find him if he stood still for too long. Instead, he kept racing away from it, trying to do as much as possible, even with a full load. His new idea would seem like a natural next step. He had secured his weekly puppet show, so why not make a puppet feature film? An unprecedented production would solidify the Muppets' success by having them appear on the big screen. Jim was also
One
quietly
more.
planning to
Kablam.
fancy, reaching out to illustrator Brian Frapp
Probably another
about a
guy, right?
possible
Yep.
non-Muppet feature. As for the Muppet movie, Jim was asking for an astronomical $8 million budget, but Brave couldn't turn down Henson, seeing how much he believed in the project. Jim would reach back out to Burns to help him draft the script. In early 1978, pre-production on the Muppet Show's third season was beginning. Bonnie Erickson left her post as head of the Elstree workshop to form her own company, being
Gaming.
replaced by designer Amy Van Gilder. Erickson and Henson
Let's
were
go,
busy
let's go.
together, and Henson wished her the best. A short time later, the Muppet
God, he's so
workshop
good, he's
suffered
so good.
permanent loss. Muppet builder Don Saline suddenly passed away on February 20th, 1978. The loss of the workshop's founder was devastating. to
Under
the
3
entire
must be
Muppet
the
team,
Hoggers
especially
one.
Jim. Although he would not cry in front of his team, the spiritually
I gotta look at the
curious Henson
tooltip
would simply say,
next time.
"We'll see Don again." Those
Tooltip
close to him
time.
would chalk it up to his unwavering optimism, the same optimism that had helped him get through the death of his brother. In April, the team was back in London shooting the third season of The Muppet Show. On top of the addition
Spoken
of Gold,
blood.
a young puppeteer named Steve
Very
Whitmire
epic
would
and
join the
edgy.
team. He had auditioned for Jane, and Jane, always one to spot talent in a person, passed him along to Jim. A slightly different opening was made for this season, and the new episodes featured a new setting,
La
the show's
la.
cafeteria, with a cafeteria lady, Gladys, performed by Hunt. Gold's new character, a pig named Annie Sue, would become more prominent during this season and become Miss Piggy's rival. The Muppet cast, now almost as famous as any guest star, were taking over the show.
Let's go.
With many episodes featuring heavier concept plots, such as an episode guest starring
Perfect.
Loretta Lynn
Let's
with the Muppet theaters
go.
being fumigated.
This is level
The show
50,
must go
right?
on at a train station.
Yeah.
More members
I
of
get
the
the
Muppet
wizard
Show
coat
were added,
then.
such as a new
Let's go.
custodian named Beauregard, performed by Goals, that replaced George the janitor, and a sportscaster named Louis Kazager, and an odd performer with a boomerang fish act named Lou Zealand, both performed by Nelson. By this point, The Muppet Show was not just a hit in the UK and the US, it was a hit everywhere. It was reportedly showing in 106 countries and it garnered an audience of 235 million people. Some reports
Okay.
were saying that it was literally
Now I
the
got
most
those
popular
hunting
TV show on Earth,
things to
and
do.
Jim was ready to put the Muppets on the big screen. He had given the Muppet movie script to Jewel after Burns completed a draft. Jewel, always the best writer when it came to handling the characters, added an emotional core to the film that brought the cast of Muppets together in a satisfying and heartwarming way. Jim had also recruited Paul Williams to join the Muppets once again, writing original songs for the film, while composer Kenny Asher would write the score.
Oh man,
While Jim wanted to direct,
shoulders
it was
painful.
suggested that he
Dang.
find a more experienced director to handle the film. Jim was disappointed, but found a solid choice in director James Frawley. The film would see the Muppets outside of their natural habitat in the Muppet Theater, and would instead be an origin movie where each character would be introduced to one another in the real world. Henson, Oz, and Frawley would begin test shoots in the summer of 1978 to see how the characters looked outside of the studio.
Excuse me, guys. We're looking for Hollywood. You know, do you know anything about the way to Hollywood? Hollywood, California? No, it's over near Los Angeles. Have you ever been to
What now?
Have you ever been to
I gotta be upgraded enough. Okay, well, let's see. Okay, I can upgrade once.
Taking a break from shooting the Muppet Show's third season, the Muppet team, along with new puppeteer Catherine Mullen, began production.
In sight of the elementals, I hereby confer upon you the rank of Chief Serpent Sergeant. I am pleased to inform you that, as of this moment, you are eligible to undertake a wider range of company loves. Go forth and do that which brings peace to the Twelveswood and honor to our name. Let's go.
Building a swamp in a tank on a studio backlot, going beneath the water in a cramped diving bell, and sticking his hand up through the log. As usual, Jim's dedication paid off, and it would be the film's most memorable scene. The film was chocked full of celebrity cameos, Muppet mayhem, and emotion. Jewel and Burns had wrote a solid script, and Kermit the Frog had never been closer to Jim Henson. Starting as a dreamer in a swamp, as Jim had started in Mississippi during his childhood, Kermit pursues his calling, finding friend after friend along the way.
Big Bird.
The film was full of emotional moments, such as a song from Gonzo titled I'm Going to Go Back There Someday, about trying to recapture a magic that he had felt only briefly, and a beautiful scene in which Kermit talks to himself.
Guess I was wrong when I said I never promised anyone. I promised me.
The film also commented on the Muppet crew itself, with Jewel injecting representations of the love that the team felt for one another.
Yeah, well, I've got a dream too. But it's about singing and dancing and making people happy. That's the kind of dream that gets better the more people you share it with. And, well, I found a whole bunch of friends who have the same dream. And it kind of makes us like a family.
At the end of the film, after defeating the evil Doc Hopper who wants to make Kermit a spokesperson for Frog Legs, the gang finally makes it to Hollywood, busting into the office of Hollywood executive Lou Ward, played by Orson Welles.
It's
a
fly
not
time.
so subtle reference to Lord Lou Grave. Lou Ward takes one look at the frog and his band of weirdos and says,
It's Tracy.
The Orm Vial.
Famous contract for
I need to be level 47.
It was a comical simplification
I can't do
of
that.
Jim and the Muppets' rise to fame, which took them 2 decades. The culmination of their work was on the screen, especially in the final shot, where over 250 of the workshop's creations
Southern
appeared.
Thailand.
Jim once again relied on the puppeteers of America, as well as his family and friends, to puppeteer the characters. The ensemble would sing the last lines to the closing song, a reprise of the Rainbow Connections line,
Sunwreck.
Someday We'll Find It, the Rainbow Connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. With a twist, life's like a movie, write your own ending, keep believing, keep pretending. We've done just what we've set out to do, thanks to the lovers, the dreamers, and you. With production on the film complete, Jim and the Muppets returned to London in October of 1978 to film 6 more episodes of The Muppet Show, including a memorable episode with guest Harry Belafonte, with a hilarious rendition of the Banana Boat song and a beautiful rendition of Turn the World Around. The message of unity is something that Belafonte and Henson found a mutual passion for, and the episode would be one of Jim's favorites to produce. A new recurring sketch is created during this time, Bear on Patrol, in which Fozzie plays a police officer with Link Hogthrob being his chief. Also, more concept episodes were produced, such as a cowboy episode with guest stars Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, and a Robin Hood episode with guest star Lynn Redgrave. Season 3 of the show would finish production in February of 1979, and the team would be back to work on Season 4 just 2 months later. Apart from yet another variation of the opening, the format and characters seem to be more concrete, possibly thanks to a few new and improved
I think that hits both, right?
Also,
it does.
The film, set to be released in May, Jim and the Muppets had to fit the filming of 6 episodes into 1 month. Jane and their 3 youngest children had joined him in London, which made the devoted father extremely happy.
Kablamo.
After the episodes were finished, Jim went on a promotional tour for the Muppet movie.
Louder and funnier.
Doing my best out here.
You're dying.
The film premiered on May 31st, 1979 in London, and it went to U.S. theaters the next month. The film was praised by critics and audiences alike, and it would gross over $65 million, blowing its $8 million budget out of the water. It was indicative of just how strong the team's work was, and how much the audience loved it. Season 4 of The Muppet Show continued filming throughout the summer of 1979, until a union strike halted production. The Muppets and John Denver would develop a Christmas special together, called John Denver and the Muppets, A Christmas Together. Denver had guest starred on The Muppet Show early in Season 4, and the collaboration on the Christmas special, especially the soundtrack, would become hugely popular during the 1979 Christmas season.
Time to Thunder.
Of the songs, It's in Every One of Us, would be a personal favorite of theirs, and Robin and Denver would sing When the River Meets the Sea and Melody Good Day and Christmas on the album. Filming on Season 4 of The Muppet Show would resume after the strike ended in late October. One of Season 4's most memorable episodes would be when the cast of Star Wars visited the Muppet Theater. With the second film in the series, The Empire Strikes Back, set to release later that year, Luke Skywalker, his cousin Mark Hamill, Chewbacca, C-3PO, and R2-D2 made appearances.
His cousin,
Empire,
let's go.
which had coincidentally been filmed at Elstree Studios, featured the new character, Jedi Master Yoda, performed by Frank Oz with assistance from Captain Mullen, bringing the Muppets into George Lucas's world. Now, months later, Star Wars was brought into Jim Henson's world. The episode ended with everyone singing the classic Disney song, When You Wish Upon a Star, which in hindsight is a perfect illustration of the phrase, be careful what you wish for. In February 1980, the final episode of the Muppet Show's 4th
Owned by Disney moment.
Each season had consisted of 24 episodes, for a grand total of 96 being produced thus far. The international sensation's 5th season would put the show over the magic.
I feel like I have the rotation down, and then I play in an actual dungeon, and I fuck it up every time. Probably because I'm just standing here, right? That would make sense.
Season would be the last for the Muppet Show. He could have continued doing the program indefinitely, with the possibility that it would become a staple of television, a show with immunity to cancellation. But Henson wanted to end it on a high note, and he was happy that the royalties from the reruns could help him fund future creative projects. While he was proud of the show, he was already on to bigger ideas. The final season of The Muppet Show was filmed for the spring and summer
Okay,
of
we're gonna
1980.
fire 3, and then we're gonna have front, and then we're gonna run away, and then we're gonna shoot.
Always come here. I guess we'll never know. It's like a kind of torture to have to watch the show.
A new cold open format would begin each episode, and more concept episodes would be produced.
Kablamo.
It was told June that the news would break that the 5th season of The Muppet Show would be final. But with pre-production on a second Muppet movie already underway, fans knew that Kermit and the gang weren't going anywhere. The final episode of The Muppet
I didn't have an OCD to do.
The episode featured a running gag in which characters referenced the
I
end
think I
of the world.
said the
A
word
subtle
right, probably
reference to
not.
The episode being the show's last to be produced.
End is here. I know the end is now. We'll see you next time on the Muppet Show.
The crew at Elstree Studios was sad to see the Muppets go, and the send-off was bittersweet for the Muppet team. They were leaving behind the most successful show in the world, but they were following Jim Henson. And as usual, he was already one step ahead of them. Jim had developed as an artist throughout the years on the Muppet Show, thanks
Yep.
in part to Jewel, characters became deeper.
That wasn't worth it.
More beats of sentimentality than just cartoon violence, puns, and dancing. The episode of Belafonte had shown Jim what his creations could do when doctly tackling bigger topics. And it seemed Henson was listening to Kermit the Frog's advice. Life's like a movie. Write your own ending.
Hello.
While Henson didn't see an ending, he did see the next scene. He couldn't shake an idea that he had been given by entrepreneur Peter Orton at a private gathering. Orton had suggested that Jim create a children's show for the International, taking some of the techniques developed for Sesame Street and combining them with the international reach of the Muppet Show. Instead of teaching letters and numbers, Jim had his eyes set on something more complex.
Let's go,
Love
Toidle.
And life. He would recruit Jewel and Jocelyn Stevenson, a writer Jim had met through the Children's Television Workshop, among others to help him brainstorm. They would need a world, new characters, and above all, a name. Jim liked the title, Woozle World, but he was reminded that A.A. Milne had already popularized Woozles. It was then suggested to call the characters Woozles, but Jim didn't like the way it sounded. Then someone brought up Crackles, the name given to the henchman from the Great Santa Claus Switch. He thought about this. Crackles. It wasn't bad, but it could use some work.
Okay, this should be it, right? That's the last guy.
This episode of Defunct TV is sponsored by Squarespace.
Stay, but Jim would take it.
Hey, boss! What's up, Cody?
Got him.
Our new
Oh,
website
shit.
is
Okay.
blowing up. It is.
Hooah.
By 1981, the main group of Muppet performers had become a family. Following the lead of visionary Jim Henson, they had conquered television
be it,
with
right?
5 seasons of The Muppet
Yeah,
Show and
let's
the
go.
ongoing Sesame Street. Jerry Nelson, a talented singer with an interest in multiple genres, had found a place to perform every style of music known to
I think
humans.
that's gonna be
and
it.
some
I don't
known
want to do
to
anything
Muppets.
else.
The shy
I'm
puppet
gonna
builder
stack
Dave
up this
Goelz had more than
XP,
come
let
out
someone
of
else
the
into the
shell,
video
creating
game.
memorable and wild characters for the Muppet Show. In recent editions, Steve Whitmire
Should
and
I
Catherine
sleep?
Mullen have proven to be brilliant talents, fitting right into the ensemble. The
I'm gonna
Muppets had
sleep
done a
in no
lot for the
dog
lives
in.
and careers of these performers, but the performers had given the Muppets a lot in return. For one, the Muppet Show shot in London, and Sesame Street shot in New York. This meant a lot of extended travel for the performers and their families.
Arm
Also,
hurty.
many of them had dedicated a good portion of their lives to a profession that Jim Henson more.
Okay, there we go. Bow. La da 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 da. This is a good leveling for me, personally. I don't even notice I got the little hat. That is a interesting mask to add to the hat. Can I take it off? Well, shit. You can't. I like the hat, I just don't... Oh, this clips in? It's gonna be a no purse for me. And we're gonna go to the inn, take a little nappy. Oh, we can do some... We can do some inventory work. That will be good. Wow, wow. Wow, wow. Wow. Let's go, bunny boy. Take my shit. Where's my, got all the armor, yep, okay. Okay, and the other one has all the items. Ding ding. Where's the items that give my, yeah. Okay, there we go. I need to give that, I need those so I can color my chocobo. I think that's how that works. I'm not positive. now. Yeah. And that'll be it for today. Oh, pow, pow, da, ba, da, wa.